All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm delighted to welcome you to today's webinar on some of the business opportunities for UK businesses outside of the European Union, particularly in the Commonwealth. And my name is William Barnes-Graham, and I am the Digital Content Manager at Open to Export. We are a government-supported online community helping small UK businesses to sell overseas. We do this through our step-by-step guides, articles, regular webinars, Ask the Experts forum, and our Export Action Plan tool. You can find all of these on our website at www.opentoexport.com. You can ask questions at any point during the webinar using the question box on the control panel to the right-hand side of your screen. We will get to as many of these as we can at the end. With the questions, we will be reposting these onto the forum following the webinar. We will then reassign these questions to your user account should you be registered to our site, and this will allow you to get answers straight to your email inbox within a week or so. We don't typically share the slides from the presentation, but we will be recording today's session and sending you a copy of it by the end of the week, as well as uploading it to our website where you can view this and all of our previous webinars on demand as many times as you like. We have three great speakers today. To start with, giving an overview of some of the opportunities for UK business in the 52 Commonwealth nations around the world and the support available to enter these markets will be Oliver Everett from the Commonwealth Enterprise and Investment Council. We will then look at a couple of particular markets within these nations, with Richard Lewis from the Department of International Trade presenting on Australia, and Mani Adjuwan from OREID Group talking about some of the opportunities in West Africa. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Oliver.
Good afternoon, everybody. I think what we'll look at today is why the Commonwealth might be something you'd like to look at. I mean, we've been very clear throughout the whole Brexit debate that it was not either or, it was both and. And I think some of the statistics will show that actually there is a great opportunity in the Commonwealth for British businesses. Can we go on to the next slide, please? As you can see from this slide, the Commonwealth really is a global network. There are Commonwealth countries in every continent. I think the ones that people would probably know about might be Australia and New Zealand and Canada, but you can see Guyana, the South Africa, the fact there are 19 African countries, and we've got the whole of the Indian subcontinent, Bangladesh, Pakistan and India itself, as well as the West Africa we're going to hear about, and perhaps other ones maybe in the news at the moment because of Prince Harry's visit, the Caribbean nations. We've also got some of the smallest nations on Earth, such as Nauru with a population of 10,000. And if you compare that to India with a population of 1.1 billion, then you understand that it is a very diverse network. I should say in 52 countries that all the countries have equal status. The organisation works through consensus, and it is it's an area where there are a number of countries even without British connections who wish to join. And I should say something about the British connections. Of the 52 members, 49 had a UK connection of some sort, but 3, Rwanda, Cameroon and Mozambique, do not. So it's not a sort of collection of former colonies, it is a vibrant nation of the willing. Next slide, please. So that just gives you a sort of a list. But I think it's important to note actually that there are 3 European countries in the Commonwealth, Cyprus, Malta and the United Kingdom. I think both Cyprus and Malta would say that that they operate very happily within the EU and the Commonwealth without any major problem. Next slide, please. We talked a little bit about the size of some of the countries earlier on, but as you can see there's a combined population of 2.3 billion people. I think what's really significant about that is there are more than 60% of those are under 30. So you can see that they're mostly countries where the population will be growing. And if you take Nigeria, which is a population I think about 185 million people, they reckon by 2030 Nigeria will have a population of nearly 300 million. So in other words, the population of the United States, and as the population grows, it's likely that the middle class with spending power will also grow. I showed on the map that there are countries across all 6 of the world's key geographical regions. But I think interestingly, the GDP of 9.6 trillion has a very good growth rate, 4.1%. And if you compare that with, as you can see there, the 1.8 in the EU and 2.6 in the US, there can be some very attractive countries in there. I think India itself is growing at 7 to 8% a year. But a lot of the countries are very good trading nations, and they have strong export histories, and we've put a value of the Commonwealth exports at 3.4 trillion. But what's really good, I think, interesting statistic is that the Commonwealth trade is estimated at 680 billion. In other words, this is the trade between the Commonwealth countries, and that's what my organisation, the Commonwealth Enterprise and Investment Council, is set up to do. Next slide, please. It's also maybe worth drilling down a little bit on what the potential could be, because it's not, as some people may think, just vast plains and huge populations of villages. There are some of the most vibrant and emerging cities in the Commonwealth. Obviously, we've got Delhi, Mumbai, which you may think intuitively about. But what about Nairobi in Kenya? We've got Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, Bangalore, Johannesburg, obviously, Calcutta, Cape Town, Chennai, and Dhaka. So big and important cities, all growing. And those, because of the trading histories and maybe the diaspora in each country, we've got to bear in mind it's not just the UK that has immigrants from all around the Commonwealth. You look at Canada and Australia, they have a very similar story. The intra-Commonwealth FDI stock is already substantial and growing, and we've valued that at 716 billion. And I talked a little bit about 2020 and how the populations might grow, but they're talking about the middle class predicted to grow to 1 billion people. The Commonwealth will be home to 40% of the global workforce. The GDP, we think, will surpass 14 trillion US, and we hope very much that inter-Commonwealth trade, with our help, will surpass $1 trillion. Next slide, please. There are some very good reasons to trade within the Commonwealth, and in many cases it's easier than you might think. One of the obvious ones is that to be a member of the Commonwealth, you have to have English as either a mother tongue or an official language, and that is obviously a key part, because not only do we share the business language, but we like to think we also share a sense of humour. Although it was pointed out to me that maybe Bernard Manning doesn't play too well in some of the Commonwealth countries. But what's also interesting is that we have normally have a very common system of law. In other words, basically based on English common law, and also financial regulations. Now, they're not identical, but because we've come from the same root, there is a very much a common thread, and you would feel very comfortable to understand that. We've also got very strong connections. I mean, there are hundreds of people I think we can all think about who've got relations or family or other extended family, or just people they're at school with, or people who just they've worked with, who work throughout the Commonwealth or come from Commonwealth countries. Therefore, we put very tightly, therefore, ... Next slide, please. Some work has shown that trade costs in the Commonwealth are reckoned to be 19% lower when both trading partners are from the Commonwealth. So in other words, if we're trading with Australia, because which we're going to talk about, or indeed Nigeria or Ghana, you've got a very much easier entry. You don't have to learn a new system of law, you don't have to think about different regulations. And I think that's a very important step that people wouldn't necessarily think about when dealing with Commonwealth countries. Next slide, please. And I talked a little bit about Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the ones you might think about. But I would maybe we should focus on the key growing countries. So we've got India, Nigeria, Malaysia. But I'd also like to point out there's two very poor countries in Africa, but with huge opportunities and a very willing investment environment. Lesotho, which is a country you may not have heard of, but we know very well, and Malawi, which is one of the poorest countries on earth, absolutely desperate for overseas investment, and the government will be flexible and willing, with plenty of incentive, to give to encourage investors to go there. And there are opportunities, everything from textiles to green energy to sort of more normal manufacturing, and even in some things such as tourism and I think I would say that anything with a green or environmentally sustainable angle would be very popular in those two countries. Next slide, please. I also thought it would be useful, because India is the largest member of the Commonwealth by population, that it's maybe worth thinking a little bit about what that could mean to you. You'll see that it's the second largest economy after the UK and the world's seventh largest, with GDP of around $2 trillion. And of course, what's interesting there, the exports are worth nearly 100 billion. And you only have to think about what is made in India these days. It could be shoes or clothing, or indeed a lot of high-tech goods as well, which shouldn't be underestimated. It's a highly educated workforce and a very good and strong technology sector. So it's not just low value. And I think there's a good opportunity there, because if there was high-value goods coming out, there's also high-value goods going in. And I think the Prime Minister's visit a couple of weeks ago showed the value and the importance to the UK of the India trade relationship. I said there that the trade between the UK and India has doubled over the period 2004 to 2014. And it's a very important area. There's obviously huge potential. And I made the point earlier that the 7% growth. What a lot of people don't know, actually, is the second largest overseas employer in the UK. So if you think of the companies that own, you've got obviously Tata Steel, JLR is owned by India, and there's a number of others who Indian investments very strong. A lot of that has been enabled because of the very strong and traditional relationships that happen between the UK and India and the diasporas in both countries. But as the largest overseas employer in the UK, India also imports a lot of goods from the UK. So we send things like precious and scrap metal, aircraft parts, and medicines. And I think, particularly with you see from the Prime Minister's visit, where there was such a focus on tech, there's a very long and exciting interest in shared interest in digital tech services. And I think it's fair to say both countries are global leaders. Next slide, please. But it's fair to say also that whereas our friends in Europe may be tried and tested markets, and you could argue with the EU, who has become a very easy place to do business because you've got the similar protections and similar, and obviously there's no tariff barriers. The Commonwealth does, in the whole, have some challenges which we shouldn't necessarily write off. But I think you've got to be very targeted in how you approach the markets. I think you would find, whilst there's a similar legal system, the regulatory systems can be different, and we need to think about that. Outside the main cities, you could have cultural and language barriers. I think with the educated, it would be with highly educated, I think you find no issue whatsoever. But maybe dealing outside the main cities, it can be a challenge. I don't think we should underestimate that. But I also think in the UK we have a very risk-averse mentality. We think, well, what is going to happen like this? What could possibly go wrong? I think to some degree, as I said there, we've got to have the confidence to overcome it. But also critical to all these actions, whether it's Europe or whether it's the US or whether it's Canada, Australia, Nigeria or Ghana, you need to find the right local partners. I think you need to invest some time and some effort in the markets, and some time and some effort in finding what you want to achieve and how you want to achieve it. Over the next slide, please, for me. But luckily, we can help. I should say, perhaps I talk about a little before I talk about CWEIC, Commonwealth Enterprise Investment Council, that the Commonwealth is a free collection of sovereign nations, and there is an overarching body called the Commonwealth Secretariat, which is an intergovernmental body, where each country, as I said before, has a single vote and has an ability to add to the consensus that helps run the Commonwealth. But the Commonwealth Secretariat and the Commonwealth has a number of bodies who work with the organisation to do specific jobs. There is one, for instance, for the most famous one's probably the Commonwealth Games, and there's one on local government, for instance. But we also have the one we do is the Commonwealth Enterprise Investment Council, and our job is to get trade investment going throughout the 52 nations. We're established in July 2014. We're a not-for-profit organisation, and maybe as a signal of the strength of our relationship with the Secretariat, we sit in their headquarters at Marlborough House in London, between the Mall and Pall Mall. So it's a very smart place to be. We regard ourselves as the apex organisation representing the private sector. We're certainly the only institution with the remit to promote intra-Commonwealth trade and investment. And I guess maybe the biggest signal of our work is that we organise the biennial Commonwealth Heads of Government, the Commonwealth Business Forum, which sits alongside the Heads of Government meeting. We replaced an organisation called the Commonwealth Business Council, which some of you may know, but we do a very similar job. Next slide, please. We're a membership organisation, and we do a lot of work for our members and with our members. And what we do also is for our members and for the Commonwealth, we promote intra-Commonwealth trade and investment, as I said. For our members, we have a health and a maritime programme. We're working on an agribusiness programme, and we have an overarching view on financial services. We've got two important events coming up, both next year and in 2018. One of which is the Commonwealth Trade Ministers meeting, which will be in March next year, which will be a day where ministers will meet the private sector, and there'll be a day of ministerial conversations. And then the Commonwealth Business Forum, which I mentioned earlier, which the next one will be in spring 2018, and importantly, it will be in the UK. I think it's a very good opportunity for UK businesses to get involved with the Commonwealth during that. The UK will then become the chairing office of the Commonwealth, the Commonwealth currently held in Malta, and we were very pleased to organise the Commonwealth Business Forum in Malta in November last year, almost exactly a year ago actually, where we had 15 heads of government, 180 government and private sector leaders, and 1,300 delegates from 75 countries. So you'll note 75 countries, not just Commonwealth countries. For instance, Japan, China, and the UK were all represented, seeing the opportunities in Commonwealth countries, in some Commonwealth states. But what we're, I think, fairly obviously working alongside the UK government is that the UK forum should be the biggest and the best ever, particularly given that there is a massive focus now on trade outside the EU following the famous Brexit referendum. Next slide, please. We're a membership organisation. We have memberships at various different levels. The top level is strategic partnership, where our members have the ability to sit on our advisory board and help run the business, and also say how the business takes its direction. And companies on our advisory board are companies like Vodafone, JCB, Prudential, Rolls-Royce, and we have also a number of companies from outside the UK. So the government of Lagos in Nigeria is a membership. We have the Shipping Association of Nigeria, and a number of Nigerian shipping infrastructure and the agribusiness companies are there. We also have companies from Malaysia and all other parts of the Commonwealth. And for those members, we do carry out some bespoke events and projects, and we try and do a good job for them, all in the aim of promoting their business and promoting the trade throughout the Commonwealth. And next slide, please. One of the headline programs that we run is a program called Commonwealth First, and we're piloting that at the moment in the UK, and we hope to take it out to India and Nigeria. And we're just doing proposals on it at the moment. The project is funded by Royal Mail, and we have a company who works with us called iGenius, who help us do the logistics. And what we're taking is 100 UK SMEs, hopefully the very best of the best, who have become, that's over 3 years in 4 cohorts, to be our Commonwealth First and Export champions. We ran our first trade mission to India 10 days ago, which was highly successful, and it took place alongside the UK Prime Minister's visit and the UK-India Tech Summit. In fact, slightly oddly, we took 27 because we couldn't narrow it down to 25 companies in July. And those will be export champions for the next 3 years. We're recruiting another cohort between now and January, The next trade mission will be to Malaysia in May, and we hope to go to Nigeria and South Africa in October, November this time next year. And as I said at the bottom of the slide, our plan is to replicate the program in India and Nigeria within the next 2 years. And the idea there is that we will take Indian or Nigerian companies into the UK between themselves, maybe to Australia, maybe to South Africa, wherever the demand is. So that it's a sort of a real crisscross network, which we hope that members and UK companies will be able to take part. Next slide, please. You'll see there that that's my name, and there's some contact details. We'll be very happy to talk to anybody who wants to become a member, but more importantly, whether membership is for you or membership is not for you. I'd really like to take this time to hopefully I've explained a little bit about the opportunity in the Commonwealth and how it can work for your business, why it might be something that you should consider but haven't thought about before. And I hope we'll cover a number of the areas that may be of interest to you in the question and answer session. So William, back to you.
Thank you, Oliver. Really interesting to hear kind of what's going on with the Commonwealth Enterprise Investment Council and some of the opportunities out there for everyone listening today. So now to go a bit more focused, we're going to get Richard to present on Australia as a market for people on the call today. Over to you, Richard.
All right, thank you, Will. And if you could have the next slide, because obviously I'm going to talk to you about Australia. We'll just quickly run through, because obviously it's a big country with a lot of a big economy, and to try and cover everything is I'm not going to be do it justice in the time that I've got. Like Oliver mentioned, you can see that the benefits of the UK business in going to Australia are sort of a common language and similar culture, and the legal and technical standards, which are similar. There are differences, but again, they came from the same root cause. Another advantage of basing in Australia is that it's got its proximity to other Asia-Pacific countries, and is in the ASEAN region, and if it still survives the Asia-Pacific, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which even though the US is pulling out, it looks like the other countries will still be in there. So that's sort of a free trade area that is being created amongst not all of the ASEAN regions, but nations, but some of them. So if we could have the next slide, please. And of course, the strength of the Australian market is it's had an extended period of strong economic growth. It's slowing down a little bit now, but it's still growing. I think it holds the record for the longest period of economic growth for any economy to date. And of course, there's a big, strong business and consumer base. The technology sector is very strong for those people who are trading in the tech side of things. And again, the language, culture, and business practices. And for what is also very important is protecting your intellectual property, and it's got very high standards of intellectual property protection as well, which is always important. Next slide, please. Now the challenge is, of course, it's the distance, because if you have to go and see somebody in Europe, couple of hours to go there, or in the UK, to jump in the car and an hour or so down the road. But to get into Australia, it's a 24-hour flight, so it does pull that thing about servicing the market. Also, you've got to remember the size of it. It's equivalent to the size of the United States, and it covers 3 time zones as well. And there's the distance between the cities. If you look at the distance between Sydney and Perth, that's over 3,000 kilometres. So it's a big area to cover, and it's something that you need to bear in mind if you're having a representative, is where do you put the representative, or do you need one in more than one city, but that's something you need to look at when looking at your market. And then you've also got to think about the time difference, because it can be between 7 and 11 hours depending on time of year, because parts of Australia turn the clocks forward and back like we do, and Western Australia runs on the same time zone all the time. So you do get some interesting time differences. If you like getting up early, then that's the time to speak to Australia, or late, depending on your perspective. Next slide, please. Now, the top 10 areas of exports from the UK to Australia, and these are very general headlines. Obviously, you can see the top one was road vehicles, and if we do the next slide, please. And then we go down as far as metal manufactured items, and we export a fair amount of apparel and clothing accessories as well. And surprisingly, even though they produce a lot of wine, we do sell them sort of other types of drink and what have you. So next slide, please. So just quickly looking at the technology sector in Australia, the ICT exports to Australia from the UK, which is 2004 is the latest figures that we've got, totaled 194 million, and we have a 10% market share. Some of the particular sectors that that are in demand are big data, communications, cloud services, so that sort of, well, anything that you supply from the cloud, so that can be software as a service or anything XaaS as a service, and also there is a lot of demand for sort of smart city applications and applications to run across the national broadband network as that is being rolled out across Australia. So if we could have the next slide, please. Now, further information are these two web links. The first one, which is quite a long link, but that gives you our guide to exporting to Australia and also covers a few of the primary sectors and gives you the names of the contact my colleagues in the relevant parts of Australia, and then if you go to the bottom one, which is great.gov.uk, then you can sign up for export opportunities, and this covers not just Australia but all countries around the world, and when a British embassy or consulate identifies an opportunity for sales, that's posted and it's emailed to you, so you can then follow up the link. And that's it from me. So I'll be happy to take your questions in the Q&A session. So back to you, Will.
Thank you, Richard. And yeah, it's really interesting to hear just how broad a range of exports there are going to Australia from the UK. And on the last point, the great.gov.uk Open to Export supports that, so we definitely recommend everyone to go onto that. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to our last speaker, Manny, who will be talking about West Africa. So over to you, Manny.
Hello, Will, thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Manny Ajuwan. My company is Orid Group Limited, and I've been doing work in West Africa for a few years now. Next slide, please. Right, just to give a brief overview of the company's experience, started doing small exports to Nigeria on construction products, and it's just grown to other West African countries, and then imports into the UK from Nigeria. And those experiences have actually led to actually having some investments in Nigeria. We're working with a company doing poultry farming. Initially, we were supplying them equipment from Europe, and also have a big interest in the power sector. We're involved in a solar farm in Nigeria, and also a waste-to-energy facility. And again, from the supplying of construction materials, we're now involved in affordable housing in Nigeria. That's just a brief overview of the experience that we have in the West African market. Next slide, please. Now, with this slide, I was hoping to just highlight that we say West Africa, but West Africa is about 18 countries that are within that subsector of sub-Saharan Africa. And I wanted to also point out that West Africa is the EU's largest trading partner in sub-Saharan Africa. And even so, there is still a vast opportunity for growth. So there are vast opportunities in West Africa, and for a moment I will stop saying West Africa and saying in the countries that make up West Africa. There are 18 of them, and the largest size and population and economic value probably in Nigeria to even the smaller ones. So the needs within each country are different, and but the requirements are now going a broad brush, fuels, food products, machinery, chemicals, pharmaceuticals. Those are things that are required within each and every of those countries. So there are opportunities there, and the EU has been quite heavily involved in exporting in those sectors. Next slide, please. Now, the potential challenges of working in many of these countries in West Africa, I think Oliver already alluded to some of them when he looked at the Commonwealth countries as a whole. But in my particular experience, I think one of the bigger ones recently has been the Brexit. I was recently in Ghana and Nigeria in September, and that's the question that everybody down there is asking in wanting to do trade with us, with the UK. So in going to West Africa or Africa, I think each business would almost have to have a Brexit statement, I think. And I'll come back to that maybe when we do the discussions. Then also another potential challenge there in those countries is navigating the diverse and multi-layered cultures. Now, the population in all the 18 countries in West Africa combined is circa 370 million people, and 65% of the population live in rural areas. So when we are looking at each of those markets within each country, we have to be specific in who we are looking to engage with. Another challenge that we might have from the UK is that it would be good for business to have a presence in the market. Not necessarily yourself, but to have a good local partner. And I think, again, Oliver alluded to that when he was looking across the Commonwealth as a whole. There will be a need to understand the needs of the market. So sometimes it's not just taking our products, our services to enter those different markets. And even within each country, there are several layers of markets. So we have to be very specific in knowing the needs of those markets so that what we are trying to take across our exports actually meet those needs. And that's, I found, has been a very key, important factor. Now, Oliver again mentioned about we have been very risk averse in the UK. That is quite true, and quite a lot of companies from Europe are not. And in my experience, they fare better and they do better in the African market. So that's something that we need to look at carefully going forward, and which comes to, again, management and support. If we have good management and support from home, from here, and one on the ground, then perhaps we'll probably take a different view, a different look at the risk that pertain to going to do business overseas, particularly in a place like Africa where you more often than not we don't fully understand their needs, and that's something that I think is key for success and for sustained growth, for sustained business. So in my experience, those are just key areas that are important in looking at going forward in any of those countries. Next slide, please. The growth sectors, again, this is just a very broad brush because we are looking at many countries with many diverse needs. But the biggest one across Africa as a whole and in West Africa is energy. So anything that could be done, take forward into those markets, there's just room for it and so much room for growth. So I had, there are quite a lot of communities there that are not on any energy grid. So their needs are specific, and people can go into those areas, to those markets, and there's a growth there for years to come. Then there's healthcare. Again, medical diagnostics, there are quite a lot of interest. Again, in my experience recently, I think again, as social media has expanded in this on the continent as a whole and in the various countries, people, the youth particularly, as we say, there's quite a lot of youth in Africa, having the opportunity for the first time just through their mobile phones to see what's happening elsewhere. And the middle class can see that, and particularly where they have the means, they want to buy those things, they want to own those things, and health being a very important aspect of life, and particularly also for children. So that's an area that there's a vast growth sector. Then consumer goods, again, as people in their rooms, in their houses, and on their farms can see what's available elsewhere around the world. So those demands are there when people have the means to pay for them. But again, I've got to underline understanding the needs for the end user is a key in these sectors. Education and training is also one that's become really very important as populations in these countries want to do well. And education has always been an important aspect of African life, even those in the rural areas. So vocational training, social media training, online learning, in my experience, at least in the markets that I've been, those are huge growth sectors as well. Next slide, please. So the best solutions, I think, when we in the UK are looking at these markets, is that whatever we're taking across provides an innovative solution. I mean, just as we in the UK are looking at other markets now because we're coming out of Europe, so also the existing markets looking to expand. So whilst we might say our need is great, but I don't think they're going to just hand over space to us when we enter these countries. So we need to be innovative, and our solutions need to be able to provide growth opportunity for the end users in those markets to set ourselves aside, apart from what else is on the ground. And we know there are quite a lot of expatriates in these markets now, actually on the ground, staying there. So whilst we might want to be in the UK and still trade at a distance, we have to make sure that our trade, what we are offering, provide something different. There's that will become a solution partner in whatever field that we enter these markets, and be prepared to go the extra mile. I link that extra mile also to not being so risk averse. I'm ending my presentation here because the market is very broad, it's very wide, it's very diverse, it's very different. It's difficult to be very specific when we're looking at 18 countries, put under the umbrella of West Africa. Just a few notes as well. There's a body called the Economic Community of West African States, called ECOWAS, which promotes economic integration. across all the West African states. There are 15 members. There are 3 of the West African countries that are not members of that body, and that's another body to look to if we're trying to reach across the whole sub-African sector. The GDP circa 734 billion, but I've got to underline the fact that Africa is still growing, and there's huge opportunities there. We just have to define our solutions and make sure that they're very relevant to the people on the ground. And I'll end that there for now and hand over back to William.
Thank you, Manny. A really interesting presentation, and it's such an interesting market. I was in Ghana for the first time last summer, and it was very different, but a lot of British products in the markets and in the supermarkets. So definitely lots of opportunity for UK business. So thank you to Manny, thank you also to Oliver and Richard. We're now going to go into some questions, and we've had quite a lot of questions, so I'll try and get through as many as I can in a relatively short amount of time. The first one is from Amanda, and it's about paperwork particularly in South Africa and Australia. What kind of export paperwork requirements? Is that something you can speak to first, Richard?
Well, the export paperwork requirements in a nutshell is really dependent on what it is. It depends on what it is you're sending, and how you are sending it, and also how you are paying it. It's because you know, if you're just purely exporting, then depending if you're saying like we're sending air freight or sea freight, then a freight forwarder will be able to help you with the paperwork. But if depending on how you're being paid, you might require additional paperwork to supply to the bank. So the best thing is take advice from the banks and the freight forwarders. That's it in a very, very small nutshell.
Thank you, Richard. And the next question is one from Flora. Flora is actually one of our previous competition finalists who I just met recently, so I'm glad to ask this. And this is kind of to each of you, I suppose, maybe starting with Manny, and it's about finding the right agent or partner in the market. How do you go about, first of all, in West Africa, finding that partner?
Okay, I think we need to go from, say, West Africa to a particular specific country. And I know UKTI and the embassies in each of those countries usually have a list of, sometimes I would say, vetted local partners starting off with, but then again it depends on the market and the sector that you are looking at. So I would go for that, contacting the embassy or the High Commission to say, I want to export XYZ, who are vetted people that I should speak to first of all. So that's part of desk research, and then also speaking to the individuals, and depending on where you are in the state of your planning for export, I would recommend a visit, because there's nothing better than actually the look and feel of the ground and actually meeting agents and talking to them to, again, ascertain their knowledge and how much support they can give you.
And Richard, also, it's a bit different in Australia, because Australia is further away and it's not necessarily as easy to get to.
I mean, Australia, yeah, Australia's further away for obvious reasons, because of geographic proximity. No, the same sort of answer applies, is contact my colleagues in Australia, dependent on your sector. Now, again, rather than you having to make contact with a lot of colleagues at Department for International Trade people in the countries, you can do that all through your local international trade advisor or equivalents in Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland. And if you go to the great.gov.uk website, if you don't know who your international trade advisor is, they will be able to put you in contact with them. And then it's just really sort of you tell that one person once what you require, and then they handle all that interaction with you until it comes to the point where you need to speak to the relevant partners. So it saves a lot of toing and froing on your behalf.
Cool, thank you, Richard. And just move on to a question for Oliver, and it's a question from Veronica, who's asking about the opportunities for business consulting and business mentoring services in a Commonwealth country. So it's kind of a point about service industry, it's kind of, or business services companies. What kind of support is there for that sector?
Well, the service companies can be extremely difficult sector. For instance, in India, I think there's an almost blanket ban on any service company exporting or selling into India itself. There's certainly opportunity. I think the trickiest with these things is to get paid, and I think it's no different really that you've got to find a willing customer who will pay for your services. And my advice would be, really adding on the previous comments, is that just finding an agent or finding a distributor of your good, whether it's a good or a service, is one thing. But you've really got to put a lot of effort and a lot of work into that relationship to make sure it works. And you've got to be extremely careful about who you choose and how you go about it, because in some countries you can find yourself appointing an agent and it's very, very difficult to get out of the relationship. But whether it's service or good, I would say you've got to make some time and invest as far as you can in the relationships, and as I say, just check the legal framework before you start.
Thank you, Ollie. We've had a number of questions for you, Manius, predominantly, because of lots on West Africa, and one of the big questions we've got, one from Dawn and Lanu, is to do with corruption in West Africa, and it's obviously a big factor for a lot of businesses looking to do business in Africa. Kind of what are your tips and recommendations for dealing with that and dealing with that in a risk-free sort of way?
Okay, I mean, as a UK company, as a UK person, I'm bound by the laws of the UK, so that's the first thing I say. So whatever practices either my local partner or the local agent get involved in, I can't, because I'm bound by law. And so when I go into those markets, I would only do what I would do in the UK, and I make that plain to either my partners or business associates from the first meeting. And I mean, I've had experiences when I've gone traveled to West Africa with expatriate companies looking at projects, and half an hour into a meeting, people are asking for all sorts of things, and we just tell them straight off, this is how we're going to do business. If the business works, it's a win-win. Both parties or all parties benefit from it. So I predominantly focus on the project or the business, and ensuring the parties that I deal with over there that if the business works, is successful, then everybody gets paid. So there's no need for me to get into any practices that I would not be able to do in the UK, for example. And so that's my get out line. That's my get out line. I mean, again, whatever market you're in, you cannot control what questions you get asked. What you can control is your response, and that's my attitude to it.
Seems very sensible. And I wonder, is this kind of a broader question about kind of a business culture in different places? I know in West Africa there's very different kind of ways of viewing kind of punctuality and time and stuff like that, and there's a different way of doing business in Africa, and to what extent do you as an exporter have to adjust to that, or what to extent do you have to put your foot down and say this has to be on our terms to some extent?
I mean, if it's a cultural issue, you are in their space. I mean, again, this is how I apply it myself. And for the first few times, I got it wrong. A meeting would be set at a particular time. I would arrive, and my parties might be a bit late. And again, as I got to understand, the markets, things are not sometimes as smooth as over here. There's heavy traffic in some towns, so it could be that your partner wants to be there on time but got caught in traffic. So you begin to leave allowances for that. And what I then do, I know what I'm trying to achieve, so I put checks in place every so often as a guide for me and for the local partner. And just as I think, as Oliver said earlier on, it becomes a relationship that both sides have to work at. So I have to work at my side of it to understand the needs and the culture of, depending on the country I'm in, the local partner I'm dealing with, as I will be expecting them over time to understand my culture and my business culture. So it's something that both parties have to work at. I mean, you can't. I find that it doesn't work when we just go there and throw it down and say this is how it's going to be. More often than not, the local partner is maybe coming across the way you want to do it for the very first time, and it becomes strange to them. So again, in a particular incident, I actually realized that what I was asking for was completely strange to my local partner. So I had to unravel where we were and understand where they're coming from, so that it became a relationship that was a win-win in a way. So whilst I was learning from them, they were also learning from me.
Thank you, Manny. And Richard, I guess a similar question regarding Australia. I think we tend to assume that it's a relatively similar way of doing things over there, but is it, or are there kind of key things which businesses should be aware of when doing business in Australia?
Not really. I mean, it's much the same business practices as we have over here in the UK. So, punctuality is definitely a must. So if you say 9 o'clock, be there at 9 o'clock, because transport works perfectly well. So you don't have to. Well, obviously you have an issue of rush hour traffic, but it's not quite as bad a traffic all the time as you can get in West African states. So you don't need to make that allowance. So it's basically treat it the same as you do in the UK, and be punctual.
Cool, thank you. And a question for yourself, Oliver. We've had a few questions in about kind of trade missions to Commonwealth countries, and one from Linda is regarding will there be more kind of subsidised trade missions to kind of Commonwealth countries, especially for kind of SMEs and the smaller end of SMEs?
You'd have to ask the DIT, and I think Richard made a good point about going to your local advisor on that. In terms of our trade missions, certainly we will be doing at least 4 more around the world. So if any of the companies listening are interested in becoming export champions, we'd be delighted to explain them. The application process can be found on our website. It is, I will say, highly competitive. The mentoring and training that we offer is free, and the preparation is free, but I mean companies going do pay their own costs on the trade missions. They have to pay their own flight and hotel, and small amount of subsistence, of course, as well. But overall, we would hope that with our trade missions you would be introduced to some very targeted people who would want to buy your product.
Cool, thank you. I'm going to ask one last question because we're running slim on time, and it's kind of a two-parted question. It's first part's from Nicholas. Again, it's from Manny. How developed is e-commerce in West Africa? And just maybe if you could, at the same time, or kind of following that, cover kind of currency. Kind of what tips would you give for people doing in terms of what currency would you use doing exporting into Nigeria or so on?
Okay, I mean, e-commerce is quite advanced. Let me take Nigeria, for example. Almost everybody buy and sell things from their phone. Quite a lot of people do most of their banking from their phone. And even if you do a Google search and Facebook search, there are statistics that show the volume of trade that's happening their online or online banking. So it's quite advanced, probably even more than we are in the UK and Europe. Even for people in rural areas, they depend largely on their phones for those transactions. So it's quite good in that respect. And the second part of the question is sometimes annoys me. Currency trade in Nigeria is mostly US dollars, and in recent years they've been, you could trade in sterling, but I noticed that since Brexit they've leaned a lot more to dollars. So it's another risk area that one has to look at, depending on the kind of business you're into, the kind of turnover, the volume of financing that is involved. But most international trade will be in US dollars.
Okay, thank you, Manny. And just a note, because we had a few questions on Brexit, as you'd expect. We will be covering Brexit in January as a webinar topic, and we'll also be doing currency in the new year as well. So hopefully we can address some of these questions next year. We're going to be releasing information about all of those webinars in a week or two, so look out for that. And on that note, I think it's probably time to wrap up for today. Thank you once again to Oliver, Richard and Manny for the really quite in-depth and very good presentations, especially given how much time we've had and how big a market we're talking about here. So thank you to all three of you. There really is a lot of opportunity for UK exporters. I'd like to remind you that we will be posting these questions onto our forum in the aftermath to this webinar, so please do keep your eyes peeled for these. Let us know if you'd like to withdraw your question in the process, and also feel free to ask any further questions you may have on the forum. It's free to use and it's very easy to use as well. Finally, our next webinar, and indeed our last for this year, will be taking place on December the 9th. And it will be a very inspiring session, we hope. It's one of our previous Action Plan competition winners, Anne Attridge from digital education company Click to Learn. She'll be sharing her experiences and tips for fellow exporters, and she'll be joined by Leslie Batchelor, our CEO, and also a regular competition judge. So if you're thinking either about entering one of those future competitions, or you're just looking to make significant steps forwards in your own international exporting, this would definitely be a useful session, lots of kind of top tips and experiences to draw upon. So that's all from us for now. Please take our survey as you exit to let us know what you thought of the webinar and to give any suggestions for improvements or future topics. So for now, thank you and speak to you soon.